So let's make this practical for you right now with a few questions. So, question number one: what is the culture of your company? And are you satisfied with it? Number two: do your people love to work for you and your company? And can you articulate why that is so? Question three: do your customers and clients love to engage you in your company? Why do they love to do that? And what are they saying about you? And four: what resources do you need to create a thriving, healthy culture?
This is the Thrive Space Podcast, conversations that cultivate your heart and your company. Hi, I'm John Erickson here with my co-host, Dennis Humphrey, and for the first time, our new business partner, Dave Seligsohn. We're both business owners who love to develop other thriving leaders who understand how to lead from their hearts. Every month, we have an ongoing discussion with leaders just like you and those who support you. Our guests range from company owners, experts from various fields, and stakeholders in business, industry, education, healthcare, among other fields. Our desire is for you as a leader and for everyone you influence to thrive.
Hello, I'm Dennis, and welcome to the first episode of Season 2 in the Thrive Space podcast. This season, we want to highlight some of the expertise the three of us, as well as our future guests, bring to address the real challenges in your business and leadership. We want you to become more prepared as leaders and to know how to raise up your people to create the kind of company you all love to work for, and be the company your customers and clients love to engage. Today's episode is inspired by the title of an article in the JBN Journal: Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast and Transformation for Lunch. In other words, culture is strong enough force within your organization that it can determine if we accomplish our purpose or see any part of our vision.
Today, our friend Dave Seligsohn is joining us for a discussion around culture, the climate it creates and how it impacts our leadership, how it impacts our people, and ultimately how effective we are as a company. Each of the three of us around this circle approach culture from a different angle. And our discussion today is going to highlight some of those three approaches. Personally focus on the hearts of leaders. I ask questions like why or how do you make decisions? How do you deal with the pressures and stress of leading? Dennis is an expert in mental health issues and what to recognize, how to be prepared to care well for the people in your company and those around you. And Dave brings a model for creating healthy culture that provides an effective plan of action. And so we're really glad to be together with you, glad to be starting season 2 of our podcast. And we're really excited to have Dave not only here as a guest on our first episode of season 2, but also as a new business partner with us, because we really love the way he approaches business and life and people and his values. And so it's really great to have you with us today, Dave, all the way from Plano, Texas. And tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here today.
Thanks, John. Good to be here. Thanks, Dennis. I am Dave Seligsohn, the owner of A2O Consulting. I started my career as a professional educator, 15 years as a teacher and a principal, and then moved into corporate America. And I've had executive roles helping to lead operations, driving innovation, developing global business development, teams, you name it. I've pretty much done the gamut of leadership roles that you can have within business. My passion is turning the experiences that I've had into actionable models that, when executed, truly help businesses to grow and transform and thrive. And one of the things that I've learned, which is very relevant today, is that culture is at the center and core of all that transformation.
When you say the word culture, Dave, what do you think of? What are you talking about?
It is a non-verbal yet overtly experienced set of behaviors, attitudes, and approaches for how we interact with one another in our business, with our customers and our clients, with visitors, with the community. And it is something that, if given language for, pervades all of our conversations and our meetings, even down to the contracting that we do.
What would you say, or how can you tell when a company has what you would say is a good culture versus one that you would say, no, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there?
Great question. There's two main factors. One, you can see and feel it. Me, like as an outsider, I can see and feel it and get a sense for what it is. But more importantly, you have to get that feedback from the people that work in that business. And what did they tell you
Mhm.
that they experience day in and day out? And the commonalities of that experience tell you what that culture is. When those two things align, you got a company that's kind of running on all cylinders.
Okay. And so give me an example of that. What's a company that you've worked with or worked for that has an amazingly good culture?
There's a
And
web
not your own,
development.
of course,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
maybe your own. I don't know.
No, we'll give it everyone. There's a web development company that I worked for and recently helped embed a cult and define, embed, and actualize a culture. And they have very unique characteristics that are fun for them. They're things that wouldn't make sense to other people. They have small groups that they call sandwich clubs. Like no one would know what that is. They know exactly what that means, what a sandwich is. They are also a bunch of Lego builders, and so they have Lego Maniac events. And so they each know what those terms mean. It's personal to them, it's meaningful to them. And at the same time, they've entered their strategic planning with new initiatives that flow out of that culture that helps them to drive that in terms of making sure that they have the right people in the right seats, that their contracts and customer relationships are well aligned. They are right now scaling their business, embedding a culture for new hires as they come in and planning the onboarding accordingly. And for them, their feedback to me is while they're still in the early throes of embedding this culture, it's been super impactful and transformational for their business.
So it sounds like when you work for a company that has good culture, that it's a lot of fun to work there.
I think that's a super fair statement. I think it's fun, it's rewarding, it's hard work, but there's a joy that underlies all of that. And your joy meter, so to speak, is on tilt majority of the time.
So I happen to know you are talking about our friend Chris LeFay, who runs a company out of the Atlanta area. And you were asked by Chris to come in and some way help him address some issues that he was having before you got there. And you brought with you, I believe, your culture model. So tell us a little bit about that engagement.
Sure. Step one is we brainstormed a list with he and one of his other core people on his leadership team. And we looked at what are the things that we want to keep that happen today? What are the words, the language, the behaviors that we want to keep? What are the ones that we want to eliminate? What are the things that we want our clients and our internal teams to experience? And then what are the key phrases and the things that are just us? Again, that's where love of Legos. And some of those things came out. And so out of this brainstorming, we take that and we begin to refine that down to a narrowed list that is written in the positive that become the core and final pieces of our culture, or pieces of their culture that they call them their codes, classic city codes, and which is great because they do a lot of coding for making web design. It was a great term. I wish I could take credit for that. I cannot. They have all the credit for that. But in all of that, they think about things like what we always ask ourselves, what's next? So one of their codes is what's next. Another one is all about the Lego Maniac, about your sandwiches. So these are all pieces that means something to them that externally wouldn't really resonate with the rest of us. But that process of brainstorming, refining, determining your final list, and then all that's great. Now I got a list. These are our culture. Okay, great. The most important piece that almost every business that I've ever worked at neglects and needs to really focus on is how we roll this out. In other words, how do we live this
Mhm.
out day in and day out? And very briefly, how do we embed this in our hiring process, in our onboarding process, our celebrations, our reviews and appraisals, our personal development? How do we embed it in our conversations with our partners, our clients, our marketing, our social, our community? These core values have to be lived out in every single area. And so we define those,
Mhm.
we make plans and objectives for those, and then we prioritize them.
That sounds like a model that is not only effective, but actually sounds like something that people would want to do if they saw the value of it. It seems like they kind of do as you work with them. We know that culture is that set of values and that set of ideas It's the set of priorities around what it means to be who we want to be. Ultimately, I think you're saying, though, that it's that climate, that atmosphere that the people around them every day feel as they work out that culture, as they have those lunches and they build those Legos and they code their websites, that while they're doing that together, the climate now changes. It changes from one where possibly we weren't having a lot of fun being together because of the way we communicated and we didn't understand our values and things weren't clear, to this place where, wow, I really am looking forward to getting up, either going to where these people are or turning my computer on and engaging them. And I'm looking forward to that. It sounds like that's what your model actually allows to happen.
Yeah, and I think of it, you're very profound in what you said, and it kind of triggered something for me. It's expectation setting. I know what to
Mhm.
expect now from the people I work with. My clients know what they can expect no matter who they talk to. And you know as well as I do that when expectations are missed or not met, that creates like 90% of our issues that we have. So this is about aligning expectations internally and externally and setting them on the right target.
Absolutely. Dennis, what are you thinking as you listen to Dave?
I agree with what Dave's saying here. I think coming from my perspective, which my career began in the mental health field, and I've spent 30 plus years in and out of that field. And as I think about culture and mental health, which eh, the mental health of people can help culture, hurt culture. Likewise, the mental health awareness of a leader can help the culture and hurt the culture. So we can set up a lot of things culture wise and communication wise for the positive. But if we think about the leader, if the leader doesn't have an awareness that sometimes there are things that programs can't fix, and people's histories are relevant and people's histories influence them um, throughout their life. And so, as people are aware of themselves, as they're aware of their mental health, as leaders are aware of themselves and their mental health, these things can be additive or distracting to culture. In particular, I spend a lot of time with leaders. One of the most sought after discussions I have with leaders is helping them understand mental health in the workplace. And so, uh, if a leader is doesn't have to be a psychologist, doesn't have to have all the education, but if they have an understanding of some basics. John, you and I did a previous podcast on having a trauma informed workplace. Just some simple understanding about what it is and how it manifests itself, and then um, starting to work on creating on ramps for their people to address and get their mental health issues addressed. That is a significant part of culture. For instance, if you have employees that have experienced trauma, or if you employees that are struggling with depression or anxiety, that will work itself out in your culture. And if you're not prepared as an employer, as a leader, to provide through your business systems and your business benefits and processes, give them on ramps to say, "Hey, that's real. That's happening to you. It's relevant. Um, we want you to stay here, but we also need you to attend to this." That speaks volumes in a culture. It creates tremendous safety in a culture, and that's one of the most important things you're going to hear these days is your workplace emotionally safe. Now, those of us that are a little crustier and, a little older, we're like the tough it up people, but that's not the culture we're in today. And since COVID, the conversation around mental health has increased tenfold. And I think that's a reality we need to start paying attention to as we're building the culture.
Mhm. So, creating a safe work environment involves being aware of the idea that there are people out there who might be traumatized or
Sure.
might be suffering in some way or be in pain or maybe something is going on that's triggering them in the place that they're at, or a person speaks to them in a certain way that triggers them. When this happens, what are you telling leaders? What are you telling them how to respond?
Well, one of the things I tell them is, hey, you don't need to be afraid of this because a lot of that's the leader's experience. A lot of time they just feel like they're deer in the headlights. But along with good culture planning, as Dave was mentioning, as you're considering how you're building your support structures, your comp benefits and systems, your policies. All of these things lead into building a safe culture because if you've thought through it, there's a policy, if there's a benefits application here, if there's just an awareness in training your leadership, it creates an environment where you really don't have to talk about it or say anything about mental health. It will just happen because that your systems will now be part of your culture and they will make it part of that joy factor of people understand that, hey, when I run into trouble, there's actually some resources here to help me while I still stay on the job.
Okay. So you and I both work a lot in the area of conflict and crisis, and we've learned that a lot of times a crisis or a conflict will happen because someone isn't prepared for something that happens. Uh, an event that a traumatizing event or an event that's simply just scary, or one that causes people to have a lot of stress or pain, and suddenly, because they weren't thinking about that in advance, they weren't thinking about how to respond to that. Now we have a crisis. Now we have some kind of conflict.
Absolutely. So when you think about attending to the mental health aspect, this brings into the issue of, are your leaders trained to listen well? Are they trained? Do they understand empathy and the value of it? Do they understand? Does your company have a model? I just had this conversation today with a business leader, and I asked them the question: do you guys have a conflict model here that when you get in conflict, it's understood? Hey, this is how we navigate conflict, and all of this goes to both your system side and your training side of just being aware of these. I might add one other thing. Um, the trauma in the workplace is an increasing uh, issue. And if you're involved at all in hiring people who are first responders, former military, um, more than likely you're hiring people that may have struggled with that. The other aspect of that is we think trauma is like big feet trauma. I was over in Iraq and something big happened to me. There's kind of a small and a complex trauma that's kind of like a trauma by 1,000 incidents. And so there's a lot there, but attending to it is just very basic. Hey, can we listen well to a person? Can we be empathetic? When they're in crisis, do we know how to lead them through a conflict and a crisis to the resource they need? It's actually quite simple. And there's a way for anybody to learn those skills.
Hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. Dave, jump in here because I know you've had some interactions with people and trauma in the workplace places you've been. How have you responded to that? What have you seen?
Yeah, my wife and I serve in a ministry that, to summarize very quickly, we walk with people who are struggling, and it's a passion of ours. And I just two tenets that I think about as I was listening to Dennis. We are all just one circumstance away from having trauma, like from being at any place for anybody, and all of us have fallen short of being perfect, right? We all have had somewhere in our life an opportunity to experience struggle, hurts, abuses, shame, guilt, all the things. And so that empathy or those experiences should give us an empathy and an understanding and a compassion for the people that are around us. And the other thought that I really have had as Dennis was talking is there's this sort of visual paradigm where you think about walking down this dirt road with somebody and they are attacked and they are laying on the side of the road and they are hurt and they're bloody and what we want to do is like, here, give me your hand and I'm gonna pick you up. Let's go. I'm gonna dust you off and we're gonna walk down the road. And often when people are struggling and in crisis, they need you to sit down in the dirt, be patient with them, listen, not fix. And when they're ready to try walking again, get up with them, walk beside them, and sit back down when that time is ready again. That's what's missing when people are in trauma. And the last thing I want to say is that there's a tendency to isolate, and isolate is the enemy of healing. We need to not isolate. We need to find right community, and that's where leaders can step in and have a role towards that on ramp that you talked about, Dennis.
I
Exactly. So, Dennis, if you were going to summarize how mental health and culture in a business fit together, what would you say?
think awareness from leaders, learning some very simple ways to listen, diffuse, and de escalate people when they are in a conflict or a crisis. Be backstopping that with good policy, comp benefits, and systems. And
Yeah, that makes a
you'll be able
lot
to
of
address
sense. I
that.
appreciate both of your guys' perspectives on this.
Hey, John, if I might share one thing also, I think about when I was a principal in a school and it was just after 911 and we had to put into place crisis plans. And like, what if our school, what if we had to evacuate the entire school? Where would parents go? Where
Mhm.
would, and we had to put these detailed plans that had multiple contingencies. What if the first place we were going to go also was not safe? What was the second place? And then just having it on paper wasn't enough. We had to practice. Like, why do you do fire
Mhm.
drills? Fire drills were silly as kids, right? Oh, cool, fire drill. We get out of math class. But when you do that enough times, and then there's an actual alarm bell that goes off, you know how to behave, and there's not very many missteps. And so I think like that, having a plan, as Dennis talked about, and having something written down, but then having the experience of practicing that in some way helps people to know that there are steps to take when something happens that's urgent and crisis.
Yeah, we saw that so dramatically a few weeks ago when the Japanese plane hit a plane coming was landing and caught on fire in Japan at the airport. And the culture of everyone staying calm, obeying the flight attendants, getting out of the plane moments before the entire plane went up in flames. And to me, that was just a picture of how good culture works, the kind of thing you want to have happen so that in a crisis like that, you hope never happens. But when your culture works and those values are in place and everyone understands, as as much as you may want to panic, you actually do what is the best for the people around you, and everyone is better. So the ultimate reality in that situation was their culture kept them alive. We we want our culture to maybe not have to do that, but to be ready to do it, as you say, if necessary. So I appreciate both of your guys' input. The two of the three parts angles on culture that we want to talk about today.
So, John, um, you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, your focus is on the heart
Hmm.
and understand helping leaders understand um, their heart. Can you expound upon that a little bit? Why does a leader actually need to know their heart?
Yeah, Dennis. One of our heroes in the leadership development space is Patrick Lencioni, and in one of his books, he talks about the idea that you have to be a person who and have a company that is both smart and healthy. And of course, you want that. If you're running a company that is making something, that is building something, that is creating something, you want to do that with the most amount of acumen in those various talents that you need to get that done. And you need leaders that understand what those skills are and how to attract those and how much you need to pay them, what it looks like to be successful, how to set up the right kind of circumstances and strategies to get those things done. You need those skills to be a smart, effective company. But he says, you know what? You also need to be a healthy company. A healthy company is one we might talk about soft skills. We might talk about emotional intelligence. We might talk about mental health. We might talk about culture. A healthy company is one that has all of the internal things in the right place and the support systems and the foundations underneath it that allow you to be as smart as you possibly can be. And so, as Lencioni says, it's not because you're not smart enough that you won't be successful. It's because you're not healthy enough. And so, in one of my books, the kind of thesis around this is that you will either flounder or flourish in all of your relationships, really in almost everything you do, based on how well you know your own heart. And when I say heart, that means what's in here. Why are you doing what you're doing? What's motivating you? What's driving you? And all of that is wrapped around some very specific skills that allow you to be who you need to be as a heart forward leader, we call it.
So, what you're saying, I think it sounds like you're starting to tend to a leader's heart, or starting to help a leader understand and become self aware, maybe in a manner that they haven't before. So, here I have a president of a company who's run this thing successfully. His people love to work for him. It's vibrant, a lot of good things happening. What kind of thing might a leader in that spot who can look at it and go, "Look, it's successful. I'm doing it." How do they need to know their heart in a different way?
Well, as I said before, one of the places that we often enter into these situations is when there is a crisis or when there's a conflict. And so, if the sign that you might be needing as a leader to pay attention to your heart a little bit more isn't always going to be around, like you said, the talent or the skill side or the smart side of what you're doing. It might come up when you're under pressure, when there's change that needs to occur, when people are coming to you with problems that you didn't realize were there, when you get some feedback about your leadership style that not everybody is as pleased with what's going on as you might like them to be. So it's in those situations where you begin to realize, wait a minute, something's going on here, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the skill set I bring here to get these tasks done. It really has something else to do with who I am. And you begin to get a feeling for, there's some growth edges here around me as a person that I need to pay more attention to.
Okay. So, if how then is that going to feed into culture, and particularly, a big piece of culture we haven't really just nailed here is this concept of trust. If
Hmm.
you have a high level of trust in a culture, um, it's probably going to have a high level of health in some regards. So, can you connect the
Yeah.
dots between trust and health in the leader?
Yeah. Yeah. The traditional leadership narrative is all about you, your talents, your charisma, your moments of courage and instinct and figuring it out and solving a hard problem. But real leadership is really about your people. It's about creating the conditions for them to fully realize their own capacity and power. And to do that, you have to develop, your store of trust and the store of trust in the people. So the question here is, how do leaders build trust? And I'm taking out of a very excellent article in HBR called Begin with Trust by a couple of really excellent professors at the Harvard Business School, Francis Fry and Ann Morris. And in their article, Begin with Trust, they highlight this areas, these three core drivers around building trust in your organization and with you. And those core drivers are really around this kind of where your heart is: authenticity, logic, and empathy. And these are things that have more to do with who you are and how you respond and how you act than they are about how much you know.
Okay. So, leaders thinking about that, thinking about, how am I thinking? Am I empathetic enough? Um, and, am I being authentic? But, all three of us are leaders, and we've led different things at different levels in our life. And at some point, we've all had self doubt. So, John, Dave, talk to us about trusting yourself as a leader, which seems to be a core thing. I can trust my people. I can trust in my skill. Can I trust in this heart thing that you're trying to set me up in?
Mhm. Well, trusting yourself is probably maybe where this starts. And I think trusting yourself comes from the sense, first of all, as you said, about self-awareness. I think probably we treat ourselves in many ways worse than we treat other people. I think we say shameful things to ourselves more often and speak more violently to ourselves about ourselves than other people do. We think people think about us far worse than probably they do. And so part of that, when we talk about empathy, is when we talk about the idea that listening to another person in a way that they believe that they've been heard, they've been cared about, that their success and their growth is something that you actually want to enable in powerful ways. I think in some ways, when we're in a place where we can be that aware of another person and what's going on, that only comes from a place where we're allowing ourselves to be that aware of where we are. And so we talk about vulnerability, which is a powerful tool when it comes to empathy, when it comes to being authentic. Are they experiencing who I am and not a facade? When it comes to me being able to articulate, do I really know what I'm talking about here? Is my reasoning and judgment sound? A lot of that is going to be communicated well and clearly because I know myself well enough, and I speak what is correct about myself well enough, and I trust myself well enough that I have the capacity to be vulnerable enough with other people to make that path clear.
I'll just add, there's a great book by Tim Spiker called "The Only Leaders Worth Following," and he talks about that an emotionally healthy individual has two sides of a coin. On one side, we are inwardly sound, and he defines what inwardly sound means, and then they are also outwardly focused, and he defines what that looks like. And it's this combination of having a solid foundation, and my heart, my faith, my work ethic, my belief system, living that out in my behaviors, and then how I look out for those around me, my outward focus. And so they go together hand in hand. If I am outwardly focused but not inwardly sound, my influence on others is not going to have a good foundation. It's not going to be in the right place. And at the same time, if I am inwardly sound, but I never turn that outward, I don't have that influence. I'm not impacting lives, and I'm not ministering and caring for those around me. And so I think those two aspects to me come together to think about why a leader has to have that self-aware, that empathy and whatnot. And I'll share one last thought here. I learned very early on as a principal that when I walked into another school that wasn't mine, I could almost immediately, just from the lobby, going in the front doors, I could tell and feel what that school was like. And I will tell you without a doubt that that school and what it felt like 100% mirrored the principal of that school. I could tell the personality, I could tell the work ethic, I could tell if it was fun or serious, if it was high academic or family oriented, I could tell the whole thing. I have now worked with hundreds of different businesses, from some of the largest on the planet to small mom and pops. And I've never found that not to be true in business as it was in the school, that the business is going to take on personality and the culture and the integrity of that leader. And so it is paramount for that leader to understand themselves, and then to also have that inwardly sound and outward focused, and to live that out in their day to day, which embeds that culture and creates that in it, and it kind of pervades and spreads that DNA throughout the business.
So as we
Exactly.
we're to bring this back, as we started talking about culture, um, seems like we got to trust, and now we're down into the leader. And
Mhm.
I get, the sense is that culture will evolve, but healthy culture will not evolve. Yeah, healthy culture is an
Mhm.
intentional thing, and from what I hear from you gentlemen, it begins at the leadership level. It can't happen any other
Yeah,
place.
I think that
exactly.
there's a rule of thumb that as we just sit and don't work, that the current takes us in the negative way. We're in an inner tube of the river, and the current is taking us the way that is towards unhealthiness, towards isolation, and towards conflict. It takes work just to stay where you are, and it takes a lot of work to move forward. In fact, it probably takes multiple people to keep that inner tube going against the current and to actually make some ground. And that is a constant. And every time we take a deep breath and think we're there, think about what happens on that river. There you go again. We got to regain ground.
This is exactly why we wanted to bring up this issue of culture with all of you listening to the podcast or watching this, as because This is probably the thing that will make or break whether your company is going to ultimately be successful. Because, as we said, it starts with the heart of the leader. Are you healthy? Are you a thriving leader that creates a thriving relationship of trust with your people? Do you have the models in place that intentionally allow you to create that healthy, thriving culture? Is that something you're doing with intention? And are you aware of the things that uh, might thwart it? The mental health issues and challenges that people have, the traumas, the pain, the realities of their life, the pressures and the stress that they come to work with every day. Are you aware and do you have a process for creating a place that's safe for your people? All of those things that we've talked about in this podcast come together, and they allow you to think well about what it means to be the best company that you can be. And so as we kind of wrap this discussion up here, and Dennis is going to have some practical questions for us, I want to leave with you with the idea that we really do care about this. We care about it in a deep way, and we care about you as a company and as a leader in a deep way. I just want to wrap this up by saying we care a lot about you and your company, and we want you to know that we're available for you um, as three leaders who've come together to work with you, and we'd love to walk with you in your leadership situation. So, use these podcasts as a way to learn, but also take advantage of what is possible and the resources we have as well. Dennis.
So let's make this practical for you right now with a few questions. So, question number one: what is the culture of your company? And are you satisfied with it? Number two: do your people love to work for you and your company? And can you articulate why that is so? Question three: do your customers and clients love to engage you and your company? Why do they love to do that? And what are they saying about you? And four: what resources do you need to create a thriving, healthy culture?
Dave, it's been great to have you with us, and we're really looking forward to walking this journey with you. So thanks for being on our podcast. I imagine it won't be the last time.
My pleasure.
Dennis, Dave, and I want you as listeners to know that we're available to walk with you and your leadership team as you foster an excellent company culture this year. We've been helping leaders like you for 3 decades. We can support you in creating and maintaining a healthy, safe, enjoyable workplace. So let us know how we can help you. We're glad that you joined us today. Our continuing conversations will bring to life ideas that will cultivate your growth and success as a leader. You can access our other episodes and more helpful information at the thrivespacepodcast.com website. We publish a monthly blog that's available on that website, along with a number of other helpful resources. So thanks again to Dave Seligsohn, Dennis. We'll see you next month for the continuing discussion around your life and your leadership. And for now, you have a great day and thrive.